There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages of the newspapers as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Axel Rudakabana, who stabbed 3 young girls to death at a dance class in Southport, has been jailed for a minimum of 52 years and told he's unlikely to ever be freed. Forecasters say Storm Eowyn arriving later tonight could be one of the worst storms in recent history, with gusts of up to 100 miles an hour, endangering life. President Trump has threatened the EU with new taxes and tariffs during a virtual address to the World Economic Forum in Davos. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with economist and broadcaster Steve Richards and Financial Times Whitehall editor Lucy Fisher. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see now what's on some of those front pages for you. Well, the Daily Mail pictures Axel Rudakabana making the journey to murder 3 girls in Southport with the headline, "What you did was not only cruel and pure evil, it was an act of a coward." Cruel and pure evil, the act of a coward is the Express headline. The Times pictures the 3 girls, its headline, "Evil killer jailed for 52 years." The Metro uses an image of the 3 girls with the words, "Honour them." The Guardian also leads with the sentencing of the Southport killer. The Story, also the lead on the Telegraph, their headline, "We face a lifetime of grief. He should face the same." The Eye leads on the heroes that prevented more people being killed by Axel Rudakabana. Donald Trump's demands at Davos feature on the front of the Financial Times as he seeks to cut oil prices. And the Star has the headline, "I've got rats in my kitchen. What am I going to do?" They say rats are heading indoors to stay safe from Storm Eowyn. And we are joined tonight by Steve Richards and Lucy Fisher. Welcome to you both. The front pages are grim reading because, as anyone might imagine, there's one story that's being reported on in all of the newspapers, and we see the pictures there of the little girls who were murdered by the Southport murderer as sentenced today. Steve.
It was unbearable when it all happened in the summer, and it's unbearable reading about it now. And it's interesting, not just with these front pages, but on Twitter, you know, hardened journalists have been saying they've been finding it almost impossible to read some of the stuff that's been reported from the court case. And so, I mean, there are layers to this nightmare. There's a political dimension, there are other issues. But the immediate reaction seeing these front pages is just one of horror that this has happened. And, you know, sometimes when, you know, Lucy and I, whoever is on this programme, you can debate a front page news story and say there are issues here which are being contested and debated. But the immediate thing is just total horror. I mean, I can't read it. Have you been able to read the details? I can't read it.
No, I found it sickening hearing more of the details about the injuries, particularly the survivors, the new details that have come out. Of course, the other part of the story that's come to light in the trial, which we didn't know before, are the many missed opportunities to have stopped Axel Rudakabana in his tracks, including the fact that he was caught by the police on multiple occasions with a knife. His own parents called the police 4 times over 6 months, seeking their assistance. And of course, we learnt this week that he was referred to the Prevent counter-radicalisation programme 3 times between 2019 and 2021. And yet, 3 years later, still went on to murder these 3 poor girls and attempt to murder 8 others and 2 adults. So I think there are big questions going forward now about how the counter-extremism programme works in the UK, particularly for young men, and it does tend to be men, but anyone like him who is radicalised in a sense by extreme violence online, but doesn't necessarily adhere to some of the traditional terrorist narratives of Islamist causes like Al-Qaeda or ISIS on the one hand, right-wing ideology, but has a sort of hodgepodge desire to go out and cause terror.
And we look at the Telegraph, their headline, "We face a lifetime of grief." He should face the same, but by all indications, there was simply no remorse whatsoever and didn't even want to appear in court to be sentenced.
Yeah, and we're not qualified to make sense of that. But I think we are, it is important, this other dimension that Lucy mentioned, that is sort of underneath these horrors and his own, the behaviour of this person in court and so on, which is why were the warnings not heeded? And it raises profound questions. Keir Starmer raised some of them, actually, when he had that 8:30 in the morning press conference the other day about it all, saying, you know, for a time, the terrorist threat was Al-Qaeda, these big organisations. That still applies, but now you have these lone teenagers, you know, getting stuff off the internet. And that raises questions about how do you define them? And they're looking at whether the definition can be extended to terrorism. How access to this vile stuff on the internet could possibly be blocked. These are really complex questions. But above all, always with these terrible sagas, there is this, is the British state working effectively? You know, why were the warning signs ignored with this figure? And that's presumably a big part of the inquiry that will come. And lessons must be learned, whether there were too many people involved, too many agencies, and no one took responsibility, whether it was to do with this definition of, no, he's not a terrorist, therefore it's not our responsibility, and so on. So there are many big issues to resolve underneath the kind of immediate horror.
I mean, now, in retrospect, it seems astonishing that these issues weren't addressed because he was known to prevent, and their whole remit is to look at those that are being radicalised. So for them not to be treated as terrorism seems really peculiar.
Well, it does, and when he was first investigated, he was found to be looking at social media content about Colonel Gaddafi, the late Libyan dictator. Of course, we now know he was found by the police to have in his possession a military study of an Al-Qaeda terrorist training manual, the deadly toxin ricin. So these, I think, for most people, sort of definition would be sort of the textbook kind of things you might see a terrorist look to sort of stockpile. So I think there are big questions about that and what went wrong in this case. And I think it is, as Steve said, in one sense, it's different parts of the state being too siloed. You know, on one occasion he was caught on a bus with a knife. And it was his second time, you know, being caught with a weapon, a bladed weapon. And if they had taken it forward, that could have seen him potentially charged and potentially imprisoned. But as it was, they took him home to his parents and kind of let it go. They didn't kind of find out that he had a previous incident with a blade. You know, it seemed that the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand with absolutely tragic effect.
Yeah.
We look at the Mail next, 52 years for Southport killer. But we hear tonight that the MP for Southport has requested a review of that sentence under the unduly lenient scheme because he was under 18. He couldn't be given a whole life order.
Well, that's another area that's clearly going to be looked at as well, whether people of his age can be given that kind of sentence. So this is going to trigger all kinds of reviews. But of course, it won't stop what happened, which was so terrible. But it is this thing of the silos is very interesting because it is a repeated theme, not necessarily in anywhere near the tragic context of this. But I think this is important. I mean, you mentioned prevent. Well, it's in the title. You're meant to prevent. So this review that Yvette Cooper has called is an important one, I think, in terms of lessons to be learned, even if the nightmare in Southport can never be undone.
DI, Lucy, looking at the bravery of those who tried to save the children, they equally will be traumatised for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely, and the teacher who took the Taylor Swift-themed dance class herself, hearing her testimony of how it has essentially destroyed her life, being both a victim and a witness, and the survivor's guilt she and others felt is just also very, very tragic to hear. But I do think, you know, part of the problem here is the kind of concentric circles. There's an issue with, you know, young people being radicalised. But beyond that, I was very struck on Tuesday at Starmer's press conference. He talked about this growing sense that the rights and responsibilities that hold a nation together perhaps seeming to fall apart. He mentioned in particular children not going to school anymore. Obviously, we've seen truancy rates go through the roof since the pandemic. He talked about younger people falling out of employment, training or education. And there is not to say that all people in that situation are necessarily going to go and have committed an atrocity like this. But there is this worry about younger people who are becoming adrift from society. Disconnected and living what the Prime Minister called parallel lives.
Outside of the system. Lucy and Steve, thank you so much. I know it's not been easy to go through some of the detail. We're going to take a break now. Coming up, we'll discuss Storm Eowyn, due to make landfall in an hour's time, and the warning of serious disruption. We'll be right back.
Saturday, exclusively on Peacock. Two clubs aim desperately to climb up the Premier League table.
It's a chance for Erling Haaland, just phenomenal.
Manchester City.
And that's a beautiful finish.
Chelsea. This is the Premier League. Saturday, only on Peacock.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love them!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor, free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Steve and Lucy. And in this section, we're going to start with the Financial Times, first of all, and President Trump's virtual appearance at Davos today. What's he been saying, Steve?
Well, first of all, look at the photo. I mean, there he is on the screen presiding over the so-called rich and powerful who gather in Davos. And he is absolutely the figure of the moment. And it's a really interesting observation about power. He is at his most powerful now as they anticipate what he might do in Davos, here, in Britain, everywhere. And there's a sort of astonishing power. And he's wielding power like no other president in the opening days, talking about settling Ukraine, partly through telling OPEC to lower petrol prices, giving less leverage to say, Putin. He's talking about the tariffs he was going to... I mean, it's just an exercise of power symbolised by that screenshot of him dominating Davos like a sort of god figure from Washington. Now, it won't stay like that, but at the moment, that's how it feels.
Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, just so many figurative bombs dropped in this address, his first from to a kind of global community since winning the returning to the White House. You know, talking about his radical deregulation agenda, promising the biggest tax cut in American history, repeating this phrase that there's going to be a revolution of common sense. I was very struck with his comments on China, you know, speaking positively about his relationship with Xi Jinping, blaming Joe Biden, his predecessor.
But saying it was an unfair relationship.
Saying it was unfair, but stressing that he just wants a level playing field. So, yes, he wants changes to the relationship with China, but framing it in a way we might not have expected, given how bullish his rhetoric about Beijing has been heretofore. On the EU, however, very critical, you know, attacking EU bureaucracy, making clear he views fines that have been levied against US tech companies as a form of taxation.
He was most hawkish about the EU, actually, wasn't he, compared with all the other countries referenced.
Yeah. It's a form of taxation. We have some very big complaints with the EU, he said. Let's finally end up with the weather. 100-mile-per-hour winds will shut schools and bring turbines to a halt. This is Storm Eowyn, described as an exceptional storm.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well how these things suddenly happen. I was in Glasgow this morning, so I can report live from Glasgow, almost. And there were posters up already saying no trains will run here tomorrow. And yet, when I was in Glasgow this morning, it was calm, normal kind of day, all the trains were running. But they
That's the calm before the storm.
But it was literally the calm before the storm. And these things can just erupt and disrupt and say no trains were going to be running. It's going to be chaos tomorrow.
Yes, we shall see and hope it is not as devastating as predicted. Steve and Lucy, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a look at the weather now for you. And dangerous storm Eowyn, as we were saying, will approach tonight, bringing disruptive and damaging winds tomorrow. Red wind warnings have been issued for Ireland, Northern Ireland and central southern Scotland. Amber or yellow wind warnings cover the rest of the UK. Yellow warnings for rain and snow have been issued in places too. Tomorrow will start very windy, stormy across Ireland and Northern Ireland. It'll also be wet in the east, more showery across the west, with snow likely on northern hills. Now expect damaging and disruptive winds through the morning, especially for Ireland and northern parts of the UK. Exposed coasts, there could see gusts of up to 100 miles per hour, perhaps higher for Western Ireland. Rain will mostly clear eastwards, lingering in the southwest longest, but northern parts will have widespread showers with further hill snow. Ireland and Northern Ireland will see the wind easing through the afternoon, but other northern parts will stay stormy, especially for central belt of Scotland.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.